Hey guys, welcome back. Today we will discuss the new movie, The Adam Project, and analyze it for its psychological lessons. Note. So we got a question here from a listener. Again, thank you guys for these. Animus@animusempire.com. If you guys have a question, this one in particular is from a listener who just watched The Adam Project, new movie out on Netflix. And he notes that on the surface it's about time travel, but on a deeper level, the theme, I guess we could say, it's about connecting with the Father, or that ache that we all feel from that distance from our own Father, or that which the Father represents. And his question is, well, what does the Father represent, particularly in this movie, but also in other movies, in other stories, in other really popular stories that have helped to, really define Western civilization, like Field of Dreams, Harry Potter. These are two characters, Ray Constelletta, Ray Consanta, I don't know. Not George Costanza, that's another character. But I think it's the characters Ray in Field of Dreams, Harry Potter, of course. In Harry Potter, they both feel this aching for the Father, and also Jesus, another pretty popular story that in which the main character feels this longing for a Father. So what does this represent? Why is this so important? What do we really seek when we seek the Father? Great question. So let's take a look at it, particularly through the lens of the Adam Project. I have three concepts here. I have three concepts that I think the Father represents in this movie, and I think we'll generalize this to what the Father represents in other stories in our lives in general. But, just to tease ahead, ultimately, I don't think the Father represents ultimately anything that we cannot give ourselves. So just a quick plot synopsis. Adam Project, it's about this middle-aged man from the year 2050 who goes back in time to save his wife, and he tries to go back to the year 2018, but something gets messed up. I don't know exactly what. I actually watched this movie this past weekend, which, by the way, I thought it was going to be really lame, but it ended up being pretty good. I was pleasantly surprised by how good this movie was. I guess there were some cheesy parts, but hey, that's okay. Everybody is complaining that, all we have is remakes now, and what we need is a new movie, like a new intellectual property. Well, here it is. This is a good intellectual property. There's a lot of homage here, I think, to, in particular, Back to the Future, but good movie, fun. I have problems with Ryan Reynolds. Like, why does he have to make jokes all the time? Why does he have to make, like, a face? It's probably my jealousy coming out, because he's, like, the, handsome and this fun guy, but overall, I thought it was a really good movie. So the main character, who's 40 years old in the year 2050, tries to go back to 2018 to save his wife. The details don't matter, but he ends up going to 2022, runs into his then 12-year-old self. So it ends up being actually a fun premise. It's like a buddy cop movie, but they're not cops. And so it's just a buddy movie, a buddy action movie, where the buddies are a middle-aged man and his 12-year-old self. And it's about how they need to get along to ultimately seek out what the Father is and save their wife. They need to figure out to figure out what their Father is, to save their wife and to save the world from time travel and all the negative consequences of it. So that's what's going on. I guess there's probably going to be spoilers here, but I don't really believe in spoilers. I don't think it's that big of a deal. But if you do care about spoilers, go watch this movie. I do recommend it. So, given all this, what does the Father represent according to this movie? Well, the first thing I think the Father represents, at least according to this movie, and we could extrapolate out this to other movies like Field of Dreams, Harry Potter, Jesus, that's not a movie. It's been turned into movies, but stories that are important to our Western canon. The first thing that the Father represents, I think, is an integration of the self. So the first half of the movie, or the first half of the movie after the first act break, when Adam, the 40-year-old Adam from the future, the year 2050, goes back and meets the 12-year-old Adam from 2022, that first half until the midpoint break, it's all about them trying to reconcile themselves. It's like them trying to get along. It's all buddy movies. It's all buddy cop movies. They have these conflicting personalities, these conflicting characters, and they need to integrate, right? They need each other to integrate. And this culminates in a scene. It's not the culmination of the movie, but a culmination of this part of the movie where they are sitting outside a hotel or a restaurant or something, and they have this conversation. And it turns out, oh yeah, so I guess another part of the movie is Adam's dad dies, not in 2022, but a few years before. So let's say 2020. He dies in 2020, and we find out that Adam from 2050, middle-aged Adam, has a lot of issues with this. And he actually concocted this story about how his father was neglectful of him. And so he could justify hating his father as opposed to grieving the loss of his father. And he only realized this once he, reconciled, once he integrated his 12-year-old self, his child self. I mean, this is a great symbolic representation of, inner child work. Like figuring out what are the needs, like what do I need to incorporate from my childhood self to make me into a fully functioning adult. And so he realizes that he fabricated this story to, in a sense, distance himself from his father, because that was easier to do than to grieve the loss of his father. An adult Adam from the year 2050, it's indicated that he gets into a lot of trouble, and a lot of trouble that he gets into is because he's acting out. So we can imply that he's acting out because he has not fully processed the pain and the sadness of losing his father. So that's what he integrates, and that culminates to the midpoint of the movie. And then from then, what do? So they reconcile to the midpoint. Then they decide, okay, we need a plan. It's not just about saving his wife anymore. They went back to try to save his wife in 2018, I think. But she tells them, look, it's not just about saving me. It's about saving the world from time travel, because the villain in the movie, is this making sense? Because the villain in the movie, in a sense, uses time travel for their own, power-hungry, narcissistic ends. So now they need to go back to 2018 to actually save the world from time travel, because their father didn't create time travel, but he was a physicist, a college professor, and he created the ideas that eventually led to time travel. So they want to go back to the past, even further to 2018, to save their father from starting time travel. Ask him, well, how do we do this? How do we save the world from time travel? So they go back to 2018 when the father's still alive. And why do they do it, right? Well, I just indicated there. They go back to the past to not only meet the father, but Dad's got a plan. Dad has a purpose. Let's go back, tell Dad what's going on, tell Dad that his theories lead to the invention of time travel, and it becomes this huge disruptive element to humanity. So that's the second thing the father represents. I think it's very clear in this movie. He represents a plan or a purpose. But I think it's done very well in this movie. We don't get that plan or purpose until, of course, we have an integrated self, until we have the 40-year-old Adam integrated well with the 12-year-old Adam. So that's the second thing the father represents, is, some plan, some purpose, some direction, which we do not get out of, by sitting down and making ourselves do it. We do not get from Twitter accounts, from lecture bros who say, hey, the first thing, what you need in life is a plan or purpose. Yes, you do need a plan, you do need a purpose, but any plan or purpose that comes before you integrate yourself, before you integrate your unconscious, as represented by the 12-year-old child, and the conscious, as represented by the 40-year-old man, although that's another interesting spin on this story, because that I really like, and I do recommend this movie, is because, okay, so the Adam in 2022, 12 years old, he's, grieving over the loss of his father, and he's starting to act out because of it. So you think what's going to happen is the Adam from 2050, the 40-year-old Adam, is going to come back and, in a sense, be a father figure for the 12-year-old Adam, but that's not really what happens. It's actually more that the 12-year-old Adam is more of the guiding principle, the guiding light for the 40-year-old Adam. So that's like a fun little spin, and psychologically, there's a lot of truth to that, right? That's the essence of inner child work, which I know inner child work, that sounds really lame. Maybe it is, but it's just about, ultimately, it's not portrayed that well in this movie, but ultimately inner child work is looking at What did you need when you were 12? What did you need when you were a child that you didn't get? Okay, we can't go back and get those needs met, but how do we how do we translate what those needs are now? And how do you get those needs met now? Just because you didn't get needs met at a key moment in your development doesn't mean you can't go back and get those needs met now and, in a sense, integrate yourself. So far, the Father represents two things, right? Integration of yourself, of your unconscious self, and a plan or purpose that comes from an integration of yourself. And the third thing that the Father represents that I think is portrayed well in this movie is validation. The Father represents validation. Ultimately, your ability to validate yourself. Now, there's a scene in this movie after the action is all over, after they save the world from the horrors of time travel and how this could wreak havoc on humanity when it's, in the hands of somebody who has nefarious goals. After that's all over, after they defeat the enemy, then there's this scene where the Father, so it's in 2018, so the Father is still alive, and he's there with the 40-year-old Adam and the 12-year-old Adam. And he, in a sense, validates, right? Not so much the 12-year-old Adam. He isn't the one who needs it so much. He validates the 40-year-old Adam. He says, I love you. I'm proud of you. I'm really, you're the light of my life, all that stuff. And you can see it really means something to the 40-year-old Adam and the 12-year-old Adam as well. So you would say, well, Mark, isn't this something that you can give yourself? I mean, aren't you supposed to give the validation to yourself? Yeah, but I think where it's put in this movie is a good indication of what it means, of ultimately its importance. It's put after the movie is over, after they defeated the enemy, after the battle, after the Master of Two Worlds. It's after that. It's actually a part of the movie that we would call freedom to live, or Joseph Campbell would call freedom to live. It's, famously the medal ceremony, like in Star Wars, after they, blow up the Death Star, they have the medal ceremony. It's ancillary. It's not essential to the story. It's nice. It's nice in a sense if you can get your dad to tell you how much he loves you and how proud he is of you. But it's not essential. So the implication here, what is essential, is that when you integrate yourself, when you develop a plan, when you follow through with the plan, what you do, in a sense, is you validate yourself. And that is what that's the third thing the Father represents, is a validation of who you are. So those are the three things, I think, that the Father represents in this movie. The listener mentions Harry Potter. I think enough can't be said of how well this is portrayed in Harry Potter. One of them, Prisoner of Azkaban, the third one. Right when Harry sees what he thinks is his father saving him from the Dementors, and he goes, "Oh, that's my father saving me." And then later on, we find out that it's actually Harry saving himself. I think that's another great representation of this idea of what you seek in the Father is ultimately something that you seek within you. You seek a unification of who you are into this being that when you don't have that incorporated, you can only project onto the Father. And you think that the Father is distant when actually there are, what is ultimately distant is an integrated self. A couple days ago, I tweeted something in the form of a meme, which is, always my favorite thing. It's the bus driver tapping on the sign from Lost Star Lisa, don't make me tap the sign. And on the sign, it says something like, if you don't forgive your father, if you don't forgive your father, even if your father doesn't deserve your forgiveness, you will end up being like your father. You will end up making all the same mistakes as your father. And I get a lot of pushback whenever I make memes like this, and people say, well, my dad objectively abused me. The way to overcome who my father was is to judge him negatively for what he did, and in a sense to write him off and to cut contact. And I do understand in some circumstances where the abuse is egregious, I understand that's could be a good thing to do. Although I have personally worked with clients who their fathers did do egregious things. Stuff that if you heard about, it would make your face melt off. and they were able to forgive him. Doesn't mean they justify it. Doesn't even mean I guess it means they accept it, but they're not justifying what their father did. They're just seeing what their father did from their father's perspective and what their father was going through. Now, after you forgive your father, after you gain awareness to what your father did to you, how he hurt you, now when something goes wrong in your life, you're that much less likely to blame it on your father and say, even a little bit, say, oh, well, this wouldn't have happened if my father didn't mistreat me. You're that much less likely to say something like that. And what this does is it frees up emotional bandwidth. And with this emotional bandwidth freed up, you are now less likely to abuse other people like your father did, because that's ultimately what abuse is you don't have emotional bandwidth to deal with other people, to deal with the world, and so your way of acting out for that, very much like the Adult Adam and Adam Project, his way of acting out, his inability to deal with sadness and grief, that's all, a minimum, or he couldn't process the sadness and grief, and this narrowed his range of emotional bandwidth, and now he was acting out and hurting himself and other people. And I guess what I'm trying to say is we need to go through this process of, if our fathers have hurt us, if they do in fact feel distance, or if they did feel distant in the past, we need to realize that ultimately what's going on is this is our narrow emotional bandwidth. And as indicated by all these stories that are vital to our Western canon, whether it's Harry Potter, Field of Dreams, or Jesus, this indicates that this is something that we all feel. We all feel this distance. Maybe it's not so much distance from our father. Maybe it's distance from something else more intangible that's easy to project on the father. But it all comes down to how we integrate our unconscious. How we integrate, as the Adam Project represents it, how we integrate our past self. Right? And that's what we can help you with here. Something that we can help you with. We do free consultations, animusempire.com/schedule. Just reach out. I'll let you know specifically, let me know what's going on with you, and I can let you know specifically how I am able to help you, if I am in fact able to help you, or if I feel like I won't be able to help you, or if I just think, you'd better off with some other on some other avenue. I can let you know what that is. My goal in these consultations is just to to give you the next step, the next right step for you, and just a few degrees off, or a few degrees more towards a more healthy direction for you over time, over enough iteration. It can be a huge thing. So we do free consultations, animusempire.com/schedule. And remember that if your father feels distant, it's only an indication that they're unconscious parts of yourself. It's only an indication that they're unconscious parts of yourself, your capital S self, that feel distant.